Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're looking at something pretty unusual, a 3,000-year-old law, and we're treating it almost like a piece of lost technology, really, because our sources are suggesting it might hold some seriously sophisticated scientific insights.
Yeah, it sounds mundane on the surface. A rule about not mixing two specific fabrics in your clothes.
Right, just wool and linen.
It's the ancient rule called Shatnez.
Right.
And the question we're tackling is why? Why those two? What if, and this is the core of our deep dive, what if this rule is actually a kind of ancient technology for, let's say, boundary management?
Like a secret key,
Right.
maybe protecting our minds, our nervous systems from invisible noise, fields, maybe even microbial intelligence.
Exactly. It's a big hypothesis connecting a lot of dots. We're pulling together things from quantum physics, material science, microbiology, even recent intelligence reports. The idea is to explore how matter, like clothing, might interact with mind, consciousness, and these microscopic networks. It really challenges, our basic ideas about human autonomy.
It's a wild synthesis. So we're going to unpack how this simple clothing law might connect to electromagnetic boundaries, these sort of invisible intelligences, and keeping your head clear in, well, a very noisy world. Let's get into it. Okay, so the law itself, it's Deuteronomy 22.01. You shall not wear a garment of wool and linen woven together. Simple, direct, but why? Why wool and linen specifically, not cotton and silk or anything else?
Well, the contrast between the two materials is, I think, where the story starts. They really represent two different natural kingdoms almost.
How so?
Wool comes from an animal. It's got this spiral structure, it's warming, and critically, it's very electrically active.
Yeah.
Builds up static electricity easily.
Yeah, like rubbing a balloon on a wool sweater.
Exactly that. Now, linen, that comes from the flax plant. Linum musitissimum. It's smooth, it feels cool, and electrically, it's pretty much neutral. In fact, it tends to shed electrical charge.
Huh. So one is animal, active, charge holding. The other is plant, cool, charge neutral, even charge shedding.
Precisely. So the prohibition is about mixing these distinct domains, the active and the still, you could say, the animal and the vegetal.
A collision of properties.
Okay.
What did people historically think this meant?
Well, you had different interpretations. The sort of rationalist view, like from Maimonides, was often about social distinction, maybe distancing from pagan priests who might have worn mixed fabrics in their rituals, practical stuff.
Makes sense. Keep your practices distinct.
But then you look at the mystics, especially within Kabbalah. They saw it quite differently. More symbolic. They talked about it in terms of resonance, like mixing them could create, well, energetic chaos.
Energetic chaos. How?
This is where it gets really interesting. Our sources mention this mystical observation. It's fascinating that both wool and linen on their own might vibrate energetically at around, say, 5,000 frequency units. That number itself isn't the point, it's the principle.
Okay, so individually they're both considered highly vibrant.
Right. But the observation was, when you weave them together, the combined effect results in, and this is the phrase used, zero net benefit.
Wait, zero. So you take two vibrant things, mix them, and silence or disruption. That sounds counterintuitive. Why would that be considered bad or dangerous?
Think of it acoustically, maybe, like two clear musical notes, beautiful on their own, but play them together and maybe they create a really harsh dissonance, or maybe like destructive interference in waves. They cancel each other out.
Okay, so the idea was this mixing creates a chaotic field, something that disrupts your own internal coherence.
That seems to be the mystical understanding, a field of static or dissonance that could make the wearer perhaps more susceptible to outside influences, less grounded maybe.
That idea of susceptibility, of needing a boundary, that makes the boundary management concept feel much more tangible. Let's shift gears then. Forget the mystical frequency units for a second. What does modern science tell us about linen itself? If the goal is internal quiet, linen sounds like it might actually be engineered for that.
It really does. Scientifically, linen is remarkable. It's known for being anti-static. It hardly ever accumulates a static charge, which means it's actively rejecting that kind of electrical buildup.
So it keeps things electrically neutral around you.
Yes. And it's also highly breathable, it dries very quickly, and it naturally resists microbial and fungal growth. Part of that is the low surface friction of the fibers, the structure itself.
Okay, so it's creating a clean, low noise, both electrically and biologically clean zone around the body.
That's a great way to put it. It's maintaining a kind of clean envelope.
So then, if linen promotes this neutrality, this clean envelope, what happens if you weave in something like wool? Something electrically active, charge retaining?
You break the boundary. You introduce the very noise that linen seems designed to repel. You compromise that quiet zone.
Right. Does modern material science back this up, this idea of fabrics acting as shields?
It does, actually. While the specific study looked at advanced composite fabrics, the principle holds. Recent evidence from 2024-2025 research shows that fabrics using natural fiber properties, sometimes with enhancements, can achieve significant electromagnetic interference shielding, EMI shielding,
How significant?
up to 35 decibels in the 0.8 to 5.2 gigahertz range.
Okay, 35 dB for our listener. What does that mean in practical terms?
That means the fabric is blocking over 99% of the incoming energy in those frequencies. And that range, 0.8 to 5.2 gigahertz, covers most common Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular signals.
Wow. Okay, so it's a serious filter.
Exactly. The takeaway here is that linen, just by its inherent nature, acts like a natural filter, both electromagnetic and antimicrobial. It's just the ancients weren't just choosing it for comfort or appearance. They might have understood, perhaps intuitively, perhaps empirically, the need for a kind of biological and electrical shield.
To maintain that internal quiet zone you mentioned.
Right, which leads to the next big question.
If linen is the shield, what's the noise it's primarily shielding against? This brings us to that really radical hypothesis you mentioned earlier, the microbial network. The idea that the trillions of microbes living on us and in us, they aren't just passive hitchhikers, that they might be, networked intelligences, potentially influencing us.
It sounds like science fiction, I know. But we need to think beyond just microbes causing disease in the conventional sense.
Yeah.
What if they are capable of influencing us more subtly? Through invisible fields, constant low-level modulation of, say, our mood, our thoughts, or energy levels.
Okay, that's a huge leap. How would that even work? Microbes don't have brains.
Not centralized brains, no. But intelligence doesn't always require neurons. Look at slime molds. Physarum polycephalum. It's a single-celled organism, technically. But it can solve complex mazes, remember food locations, basically learn and adapt. No brain, no nervous system.
Right, I've seen those experiments. It's incredible.
Or think about biofilms. Those communities of bacteria that form layers. They act like multicellular coalitions. They communicate, coordinate behavior, self-regulate, often using bioelectrical signals. They function as a system, an aware network.
So intelligence expressed through the network itself, through structure and field dynamics, not just chemicals.
Exactly. And this is where the electrical aspect comes back and where Shatnez starts to look possibly prescient.
Because of frequencies.
Precisely. There's some breakthrough evidence here from 2024-2025 focused on fungal networks. Researchers like Fukasawa and his team recorded these really slow but consistent electrical oscillation cycles in certain types of fungi, cycles lasting for weeks.
Weeks. Wow.
And even more directly relevant, perhaps, fungal mycelia, the underground networks, have been successfully used to control biohybrid robots. They can reliably transfer signals within a specific frequency range.
What range are we talking about?
The experiment showed reliable signaling in the 100 Hz to 10,000 Hz range.
Okay, now connect that to us. The human brain operates electrically too, right, on specific frequencies, alpha, theta, delta waves.
Exactly. Those core brainwave states operate primarily between, say, 1 Hz and maybe 100 Hz, very low frequencies.
So if our brain is working in that 100 Hz zone, and these microbial networks, like fungi, are shown to generate or conduct signals, potentially even overlapping or nearby frequencies,
then you have the potential for what you might call co-resonance or interference, a mixing of fields, just like the Shatnez rule seems concerned about.
your brain is operating on its frequencies, the vast microbial network you carry might be operating on others, and if those signals overlap or interact,
It could lead to interference, or maybe even a kind of unintended synchronization. If the linen acts as a shield, maybe mixing it with wool, which attracts static, remember, somehow weakens that shield, or creates its own disruptive field, allowing this subtle microbial signaling to have a greater effect.
So the danger isn't sickness in the usual sense, but a subtle modulation, affecting mood, clarity, energy levels, messing with your internal coherence.
That's the hypothesis. Subtle mental or energetic modulation originating from the biological field we host.
Okay, this interaction, this potential coupling between our nervous system and, non-human biological intelligence. It's a pretty wild idea.
It is, but what's fascinating is that, according to the sources we're looking at, this type of interaction seems to have been described throughout history, just using different languages, different frameworks.
Yeah.
We can think of maybe 3 main ones: spiritual, medical, and strategic.
All right, let's break those down. Language 1. Religious and mystical. What are we talking about here?
Well, think about ancient stories or traditions involving, say, spirits or entities that seem to influence human thought or behavior. Things like the Debuk in Jewish mysticism, or maybe the jinn in Islamic tradition.
Entities that could possess or influence someone.
What if those narratives were early, metaphorical ways of describing the experience of this field coupling? The feeling of an intrusive external influence affecting one's consciousness, but described without the language of neuroscience or microbiology.
An external field active system interacting with the human nervous system.
Possibly. And if that's the case, then maybe the traditional interventions, things like purification rituals, wearing specific garments like pure linen, engaging in rhythmic prayer, or chanting, maybe these weren't just symbolic acts, maybe they were practical techniques.
Techniques to do what?
To act as field stabilizers, to reinforce the boundary, break the unwanted resonance, and reestablish the person's own internal coherence, shutting down the interference, basically.
Interesting. Okay, so that's the spiritual or mystical language. What about language two? Medical and clinical. How does modern medicine connect to this idea of field coupling?
We're seeing increasing validation for the profound connection between our internal ecosystem, our microbiome, and our neurological state. It's not just about digestion anymore.
The gut-brain axis is pretty well established.
Exactly, but it goes deeper. Look at a recent clinical breakthrough from 2025 mentioned in our sources, a Duke University study led by Julia Ogo. They were looking at chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS.
Which has always been notoriously hard to diagnose definitively.
Right. But using an integrated analysis of the participants' microbiomes, looking at the whole ecosystem, they were able to distinguish individuals with CFS from healthy controls with 90% accuracy.
90%. Just based on their microbes.
90%. It strongly suggests that the specific composition and organization of our internal microbial world is deeply, measurably linked to our neurological function and energy levels. Our internal biological field matters immensely.
Okay, so our internal state is incredibly sensitive to this microbial ecosystem. Does that sensitivity make us potentially vulnerable to external fields or influences too? Could our own microbes act as antenna, in a way?
That's the bridge to the third language.
Yep.
Military and strategic. If human consciousness and physiology can be subtly influenced by biological or electromagnetic means, then historically, governments would naturally be interested in understanding that.
Right. We know about past research programs, things like MKUltraRay or Project Artichoke, exploring various methods of influence, not just drugs, but also potentially electromagnetic effects.
And this is where a very recent and quite crucial development comes in. The update on the Havana Syndrome investigation from January 2025.
This is important, and we need to be clear, we're just reporting what the intelligence assessments now say. What happened?
There was a significant reversal. 2 U.S. intelligence agencies completely changed their previous stance. They went from downplaying the possibility of directed energy attacks to now officially acknowledging that, yes, foreign nations had been researching directed energy technologies and had been making progress.
Acknowledging the research is one thing, but did they connect it to the actual incidents?
They did, cautiously. 2 agencies now assess that radio frequency weapons are a plausible explanation. They use the phrase roughly even chance for at least a subset of the reported anomalous health incidents.
Okay, roughly even chance isn't definitive proof, but it's a huge shift from previous dismissals.
It's a massive shift. And importantly, research into the biological effects of radio frequencies, RF bioeffects, is now officially funded and ongoing.
So putting it all together,
it validates the core model we're exploring. The idea that external electromagnetic fields could potentially affect human consciousness, possibly interacting through our biological systems, like the microbiome acting as an intermediary or amplifier, is no longer just theory or ancient mysticism. It's now an active area of national security concern and scientific research.
Wow. Okay. So if we accept this integrated model, even provisionally, what does it actually mean for us, for you listening? The central idea seems to be that our consciousness isn't this isolated, fully sovereign thing inside our heads.
That's the challenging part. It suggests we're more like a node in a network. There's this constant coupling happening. Our physical body, our clothes, the material, interacting with our vast microbial systems, influencing our neurological activity, which then shapes our conscious awareness. Material right arrow, microbial right arrow, neurological coupling, right arrow awareness.
It really does challenge the idea of complete personal autonomy, doesn't it? We're potentially in dialogue with things we aren't even aware of.
Which means managing your boundaries becomes incredibly important. It's essentially managing your consciousness.
So what are the practical takeaways? What can you actually do?
Well, the first step is simple awareness. Start noticing materials. Pay attention to the fabrics you wear. Which ones feel calm, neutral? Which ones seem to generate static, feel clingy, or maybe even slightly agitating?
Like applying the Shatnez principle consciously. Choose fabrics that support that quiet zone, neutral fabrics like linen.
Exactly. Prioritize materials designed to shed charge and maintain that boundary integrity. Think natural, neutral, breathable.
What else beyond just clothes?
Mental hygiene becomes key. Cultivating stable internal patterns. Things like focused attention, mindfulness, steady breathing techniques. These can help stabilize your own nervous system's frequencies, making it potentially more resilient against unwanted coupling or interference.
Strengthening your own signal, so to speak.
In a way, yes. And finally, environmental awareness. Start noticing how different settings affect you. Do you feel different? Clearer, foggier, calmer, more agitated in highly networked environments, places dense with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, lots of the people. Pay attention to those shifts in mood or mental clarity.
It reframes things like the Shatnez law completely. Not superstition, but maybe incredibly sophisticated, practical intelligence about managing your personal field, your boundaries, protecting your consciousness.
Ensuring resonant harmony within yourself rather than chaotic interference from the outside. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So we started with a seemingly obscure ancient law about not mixing wool and linen. And where we've ended up is, well, it's a pretty breathtaking perspective. This idea that we are fundamentally interconnected, not just with each other, but with this whole spectrum of life, from the microbes on our skin and in our gut, maybe even down to quantum effects in our own biology, like in microtubules, all potentially sharing or influencing our cognitive space.
It's remarkable how the evidence seems to be converging from so many different fields now. Quantum biology, neuroimmunology, material science, and yes, even intelligence assessments. The picture emerging is one where human consciousness is inherently networked, inherently sensitive to its environment, both visible and invisible.
And that ancient wisdom, the focus on coherence, purity, boundary integrity, it suddenly seems incredibly relevant again, especially as we move deeper into an age saturated with electromagnetic fields and advanced technologies.
The need to understand and manage these interactions becomes paramount.
Which leaves us and you with a final thought to carry forward. It seems the question is no longer really whether these invisible fields and intelligences exist around us and interact with us. The evidence is mounting that they do. The real question now might be, will we learn to engage with this reality consciously? Will we learn to manage our boundaries, to dance with these subtle forces deliberately? Or will we just remain unconscious partners in a vast cosmic dialogue we never even knew we were having?